Ripton focused on one kid at a time. So playing with a whole group of people was different, except after the baseball game, he said, "Who wants to come over?" And 10 or a dozen kids did.
Well, what I was trying to establish is that it's important to know through the story that Ripton does have some problems integrating a lot of sensory input. He has a sensor. What is the official word for it?
Ripton, when he was young, he was diagnosed as having sensory integration issues, and that's something that kids really do grow out of, and he has. But at that point in his life, that's what he was defined as.
And Ripton and his younger brother Morgan, and how old's Morgan at this point in the story?
Morgan was 2.5 years younger.
Okay, and you adopted them both. They're in your house. You're living in an East Village that's very different from the East Village of today. I mean,
very different.
Any playmates that they might have had would have had to come from school, where they went to a school uptown.
Our kids were going to a white Jewish school on the Upper West Side at that point.
And I think at this point that you say that there were very few, sometimes you'd have kids from his school over the house, but very rarely was the invitation extended back.
That is true.
So at this point, some of the kids, Ripton invites them home with him.
Correct.
What do you think?
He invites both sides of the baseball field home.
He invites everyone who's playing home.
And this was 98. We suspected, didn't know that these were kids from public housing, and kids did not have Nintendo generally then. So they came for Nintendo. And my wife Leslie and I were really thinking, my God, like the neighborhood is really coming to us, which we wanted. We moved to the Lower East Side because we wanted an integrated, diversified neighborhood. But we hadn't found it coming into our house.
The first group of kids, how many kids were there in that first group?
10 or a dozen kids came home.
So it's a crazy time, and they stay late.
They stay late. They eat us out of house and home, literally.
Yeah.
Well, pretty soon, kids started sleeping over, and it was summer. So they'd sleep over at night, go home. Then when school started, the 5 boys who we really became parents to started sleeping over every weekend. And then my wife's rule was that they had to go home on a school night. And June came, July, somewhere around July, we realized that they hadn't gone home since school let out. And that happened again the next summer. And then later in the story, later in our lives with the boys, we realized that one of them, Carlos, had stopped going to school.
Right.
And he was going to fail. Did
they establish themselves as more or less permanent fixtures in your home because they were Ripton's best friends of the group, or because you saw something in them that they needed you?
They saw something. They were the ones who kept coming. They were friends with each other.
Yeah.
And they're 4 or 5 years older. We called them the bigger boys. We still call them the bigger boys, even though they're now young adults. And Leslie at one point instituted a half-hour reading rule. Every day that kids were over, they had to read. We all had to read for half an hour. And those are the boys who survived the half-hour reading rule.
Okay. So does that mean, and it doesn't mean that they were good readers. It means that they had to put up with something they didn't like very much, reading, and it shows that they really wanted to be there.
Correct. They were not Juan Carlos is a reader, but Juan was the only natural reader.
Yeah. And in fact, you would say, circle every word on a page you don't understand, and you'd look at their books afterwards, and some of them circled a lot of words.
A lot of words. And we had read that if you circle more than like 3 words on a page, it's beyond your reading level, and these were books already below their reading levels. Now, I say that today their reading levels are wonderful.
So they come to your home. They make themselves more or less permanent fixtures. What's going on with Ripton at school, and what's going on in your marriage? How does their presence affect that? Maybe it mucks things up. Maybe it is the one ballast, one port in a storm for all the tumult that's going on.
Tumult is a good word because there was a lot of it. Ripton and Morgan eventually stopped going to the school on the Upper West Side. That really happened when Leslie and I separated. I understand that the night that I moved out of the house, the bigger boys went down to Tompkins Square Park and sat on a bench and said, my God, did we cause this? But that's what kids do. Mm-hmm. They didn't cause it. I'm not an easy person, and I had decided that it was time for our marriage to end. And in fact, I lived out of the house for 2.5 years.
They didn't cause it Did
No, they didn't cause
Did
it.
the fact that there was so much chaos? I mean, you've looked back. Was it good chaos? Was it more stressful?
Oh, I think it is wonderfully deconstructed chaos. The kids would throw themselves off of a knee wall balcony that we had playing World Wrestling, WWF. They would play a game throughout the entire house that they called the gun game. It was like a tag, except they'd turn off all the lights in the apartment and put flashlights on the end of the guns and tell us we couldn't open the refrigerator. So I think we were crazy, but I think good crazy, and I think it has saved 5 lives.